I trust you when you hurt me so bad? You hurt me so bad. You hurt me so bad. Why would I love you when you hurt me so bad? You hurt me so bad. You hurt me so bad. How can I trust you when you hurt me so bad? You hurt me so bad. You hurt me so bad. Why would I love you when you hurt me so bad? You hurt me so bad. You hurt me so bad.
Right on Sports is a program that teaches middle school kids how to write about sports as a way to inspire them to write. Right on Sports is theme-based education. It's about critical thinking, it's about interviewing, it's about building self-confidence.
Our goal is ostensibly to help students improve their writing skills by writing about a topic of interest. And so in this case, sports. We define sports really broadly so that it makes it really accessible for students to write about something that they want to learn more about and care about.
It's an incredibly important program. It gets these kids excited about journalism, and it's really cool that they can go and meet these athletes firsthand. I mean, that's an opportunity that not a lot of people have.
We have a student-teacher ratio of 4-to-1, which means that in this 2-week program, a child is getting a really amazing personal attention about what they're thinking, about what they're writing, about how to write.
It's so rewarding to come back and help these kids. I can see these kids are so willing to learn. I mean, they're here in the middle of the summer writing. Like, that's just the coolest thing to me.
It's the middle of the summer, and it's 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and the buses are ready to take the students home. And the students are saying, no, give me 2 more minutes. Give me 2, I gotta get this last sentence down. I gotta finish this story. So to me, that speaks volumes about how engaged they are when they're here. You can't ask for more than that.
I really like to write. You know, I'm planning on being a poet one day, and so writing is like really essential to me. So writing and planning on our future stories is the most important part of my day.
Taking the tools from this program as they make career choices, as they make life choices.
You can do anything you want as long as you put your mind and your heart to it.
Hi, my name is Eric Jacobson, and I'm the program director for Right on Sports, which, as you just saw, is a summer writing program for middle school students, where we use writing about sports as a way to get students more interested and more confident in their writing. At the heart of Right on Sports is an opportunity to pick a topic and follow that topic through for 2 weeks, doing the research and doing multiple drafts and revisions until they're really happy with the final polished piece. To get there, one of the things we do is bring guest journalists who talk about their craft, right? What does it mean to be a writer? What does it mean to be a journalist, and particularly be a sports journalist? We bring these guests in, students get a chance to talk to them one-on-one, ask them questions about their career, about their interests, things that they've learned over the course of their experience in writing about sports. During the pandemic, we couldn't do this in person, so we shifted to creating the speaker series where we did this online. And we liked the format so much, and because we feel like it expands how many students can participate, we've continued to do it even though that we're back in in-person camps. We've already had 3 speaker series episodes this summer. The first was about basketball, the second was about soccer, and then last week we had a professional Halo player and esports journalist come in. For the last episode of the summer, we are focusing on Sam Mills. Sam Mills, for those of you that might know, played his college football here at Montclair State, then went on to an NFL career, and this August is being inducted into the Football Hall of Fame. Sam died tragically young, so he's not here to celebrate this with us. But because we're at MSU, we felt like we really wanted to honor Sam and his accomplishments, particularly this summer as he's being inducted into the Hall of Fame. So in a second, I'm going to bring on 2 reporters that covered Sam during his NFL career. I'm going to ask them a few questions, and then I'm going to invite some of the students in the camp this summer to come on and ask questions as well about Sam. So without any further ado, I'd like to invite Brian Allee-Walsh and Scott Fowler on. Welcome, both of you, to Right on Sports, the Summer Speaker Series.
Thanks, Eric. Good to be here.
Yeah. Where are you calling in from, since this is summer football season?
I'm calling in from New Orleans. I'm calling in from New Orleans, and the Saints are opening camp today at their facility. So it's a little rainy here, but that's about the same. It's about what you can expect in New Orleans at this time of the summer.
Okay. Scott?
And I'm calling in from Spartanburg, South Carolina, which is about 70 miles from Charlotte, North Carolina, where the Carolina Panthers are based. This is where the Panthers have done their training camp for the past 27, 28 years. Sam Mills was here over the summer many different times, first as a player and then as an assistant coach. And as always in Spartanburg, it is very hot.
Okay. So, as part of being NFL reporters, how important is the summer sessions for you in getting ready to write about the upcoming season?
Well, it's very important for all journalists because, as students have probably learned in this excellent program you have to have some access to write a good story, and you have to do research. And the way we do that at a large part is in training camp. It is a more relaxed place to talk to players. They're not winning or losing games right now. Most people are happy. They're more prone to sit down with you and discuss things. This is probably where I first got to know Sam Mills well, was in Spartanburg, because they're just sort of practicing and they have some free time. And that is important. Access to anybody you want to interview, that's very important if you're going to write a good story. And so this is sort of our summer camp in a way, our summer writing and reporting camp.
So, Scott, pardon me, Brian, so after a game,
Right.
players are rushed, right? Like, you've got the locker rooms open, you have just a short period of time, but during the summer, the pace is different and you have more of that time to kind of get to know them.
Exactly. Slower paced, and a locker room is a quick setting where they're trying to get out to see their family or trying to go catch a plane or whatever, and they still will speak to you for a few moments. But here, you can speak to them for 20 or 30 minutes, and they're happy to do it because all they're doing is going to 2 different practices a day, so they're kind of happy to see a different face and talk about some things other than what to do on 3rd and 10.
Yeah, sorry, Brian, I had to cut you off. Yeah.
No, that's okay, Eric. To piggyback on Scott, he brings up a great point about the accessibility and getting to know players, and not only the veterans, but the incoming new players, draft choices, free agent signees, and what have you. But it's also a good time and a great situation for the beat writer, the columnist, to get to know the team as well, because the teams change over every offseason. And it allows a writer to get a good perspective on whether or not the polls are correct or the rankings or where this team fits. And of course, the preseason games help that too. But just the daily practices, you can see the young guys come on or the young guys fail, veterans both doing the same thing. It's a great opportunity to give you insight and firsthand knowledge of the team that you're about to spend the next, 9 months with. So that I always enjoyed that because it allowed firsthand knowledge, sight in scene of the team you're about to cover.
So one of the things our students always want to know from reporters is how they ended up in the position that they're at. So why football for the two of you? Why did it become football that you ended up writing about?
Go ahead, Brian.
Okay. The New Orleans and Louisiana they are football. It's football country. It's SEC country, and football is the top dog, whether it be professional football, which is certainly the number one attraction in New Orleans, but LSU football is right behind it, and the SEC. And I'm really a college basketball fan. I grew up in Indiana, went to IU, home of Bobby Knight for so many years, and I was a big college basketball fan. But I saw that the best best way to build a career and build a brand for yourself and help you navigate the sports writing industry, newspapers and what have you, is to try to cover the number one sport in your area, and that is the Saints in the NFL. So that was the big attraction for me.
Scott?
For me, I was always drawn to sports and to writing. And when I was the age of your students, around probably 11 or 12 years old, on Sunday afternoons, I would camp in front of our TV screen and watch often 2 straight NFL games in a row. And occasionally, if the Dallas Cowboys were playing, who were my favorite team at the time, I would try to write a pretend story on a notebook paper. So I was sort of born into wanting to do this, I guess. And then when I went to college, I got on the student newspaper, which I would suggest anyone do if they're at all interested in journalism. The student newspaper in high school and in college is super helpful for you, super helpful. And then from there, I just kind of progressed for different jobs, but I always kind of wanted to cover NFL, which I do a lot of the time, not all the time, but a lot of the time now as a sports columnist. I'm a sports columnist, so I write a lot of opinion sort of stories, but like Brian, our area is consumed with NFL football. So probably half my time is spent covering the Carolina Panthers and the NFL.
So a mix of both, kind of following your own passion, but then also recognizing what doors are open, right, in terms of writing about things that people are actually going to read.
Exactly.
Yeah, Scotty brings up a good point about where the passion began. And I feel the same way that Scotty did. I remember growing up in Minneapolis, Minnesota, as a 5-year-old and rushing out to the front door to pick up the paper in the snow, and just migrating right to the sports pages. And my passion for sports never dies. It just never died. And I feel like one of the lucky people in that I graduated from college with a degree in journalism. And I was fortunate to be able to pursue that in my career. And not a lot of people can say that. And I feel very, very fortunate to have been able to do that. But I remember a coach saying the best ability is availability. And it really smacks true in almost any career or professional choice that we make, that you're about to make when you get out of schools. Is that, boy, I tell you what, the best way to advance yourself in any profession is to be good, okay, but be available. And in our business particularly, it's amazing how often an editor will go down the line, whether it be a student yearbook or anything. Scott, can you make it Saturday? We've got I can't make it. Brian, can you make it? You're darn right I can make it. And you do a good job, and you can help yourself immensely by being available.
So a number of journalists across the years in writer of sports have said that, Brian, along those lines, the answer is yes, right? So can you cover that? Can you cover that lacrosse game? Yes, right. Do you know anything about lacrosse? No, I don't know, but I can cover that lacrosse game, and I'm going to learn between now and when I cover that lacrosse game, right?
That's so true. Eric, it's so true.
Yeah. So then a little bit about Sam Mills for people that don't know. So he played at Montclair State, which is a Division II school, right? So usually Division II schools are not kind of, feeders for the NFL. He was like 5'9", 5'10", depending on how generous you were going to be the day that you were sizing him up, right? So then out of college, he was had a cup of coffee with the Browns, didn't make it there, right? Tried with the Toronto Argonauts, didn't make it there. Ended up joining the USFL, which was a fledgling league, lasted a couple years, went under, but he went with his coach to New Orleans, and all of a sudden it clicked, right? And then he started having a great career. First part of his career in New Orleans, second part of his career in Carolina, where he then became a coach after he retired. So that's a little bit about Sam Mills. So our first student, Byron, has a question for both of you about that. Hi, Byron.
Hi,
Hey, Byron,
my
how
name
are
is
you,
Byron
sir?
Schwartz, and my question is for the both of you. What was your first story that you wrote about Sam Mills?
Go ahead, Scotty.
Well, that's a good question. The very first story I would have written about him is he was coming to Carolina as a free agent. He was leaving New Orleans. He was already 36 years old, so he was old. I mean, most NFL players are retired. That's not old in life, but that is very old in the NFL. So at the time, I remember covering his press conference here and how he had, left New Orleans and had come to Charlotte, and I was immediately like taken by him. I mean, he was so short. It always came up. I mean, I'm 6'2", and so I just towered over Sam. And he had these glasses on, sort of like these, but a little thinner. And he just looked like he was a professor at a small college or something. And no, he was supposed to be the Panthers, one of their starting inside linebackers. So I was very taken with him right away. His personality, he was funnier than people remember sometimes. And always the object of his humor was himself. He was very gentle. He never made fun of other people. But in that press conference, he made fun of himself. And he mentioned that his nickname was the field mouse, which, because he was so short. And so I just remember even in that first time, this was 1995, those were my impressions of him.
Byron,
Brian?
a little different than Scotty. By the time he arrived in Carolina, Sam had established himself as a Pro Bowl, All-Pro, a potential Hall of Fame linebacker. When I first met him in '86, he was a no-name and 5'9", and 5'9" was the first thing that you noticed about him. And he was going to try and make it into the NFL. Jim Mora, who had brought him on board in Philadelphia, he was with the USFL Philadelphia Stars, and Sam was one of the players that had shined in the USFL environment, and they brought him in. And it wasn't so much about the professorial look, or even he didn't have any resume to speak of from a professional football standpoint. So, the first questions were about his size. How does a man your size make it in this league when you're playing against running backs that are bigger than you, heavier than you? And he quickly showed that not only did he belong, but that he could distinguish himself among the trees. And after you realize that, and you got to know Sam a little bit, you understood that this guy, there was no ceiling for him. He could be as good as he wanted to be because of the man he was.
Right. And I think we have an immediate follow-up question related to that. Kylan and Hillside, I think you have a question for both Brian and Scott about Sam.
What was the most interesting to you? You both, of his NFL career.
Yeah, so the most impressive part of his career.
I would say this, and I know it's probably a cliche, Kylan, you've probably heard it in your young life, but he was a better man than he was an athlete. And that what has always stuck in my mind is that with Sam, you got the real deal. And I remember one situation. It was the players' strike of '87, and Sam, like many of his veteran teammates, were holding out. And they had there were some replacement players in, and they were boycotting the practices at the Saints facility. And they ended up, all the veterans who were boycotting Kylan, were in their cars, and they kind of did laps around the parking lot. And Sam was one of those kind of people that he took time. He respected his journalists, the day-to-day beat people who covered their team. And I remember him stopping in his car and asking me, I mean, it was a discussion format, Kylan, about what did I think about the players that were striking. Did I agree with them? And it wasn't just somebody trying to, influence me one way or another. He really was curious as to what I thought, why I thought it, and to hear my reasonings for covering that event. And so that struck such a chord with me, and it carried over in the years that I got to know Sam even better. It was just such a vibrant way of him. He was really interested in not just playing football. He was interested in most aspects of life, and he was interested in other people too. So that's what struck me mostly about him, I think.
Yeah, Scott?
Well, for me, it probably was even after his career here, because he played 3 years for the Panthers, but then retired and then became a coach, assistant coach, and then got cancer. And it was a horrible blow to the Panthers, most of all to Sam, of course, and to his family. He has 4 kids, and they were pretty young, several of them at that time too. And so to me, I guess it was how bravely he fought cancer, and how he was not a super public person. Like, he wasn't always jumping up in front of cameras or something, but he made his cancer fight public because he thought it would help other people who were also going through this same tough situation. And in fact, I guess the most lasting thing here is he gave the Panthers their motto. Their motto here, and y'all probably don't know this because you're not, Panther fans, but it's called "Keep Pounding, Keep Pounding." And Sam said that phrase when he was telling the players one time about his own cancer fight, and they were about to play a big game against the Dallas Cowboys. And yeah, you're seeing some great highlights of Sam here. But "Keep Pounding" was sort of his motto that he kind of just came up with, that you can either quit anytime something's hard in life, or you can keep pounding, you can keep fighting. And so the Panthers still stick with that today. That's sewn inside every Panther jersey today. So Sam really had a lasting impact here.
So, Brian, I know that you were really invested in advocating for Sam to be in the Hall of Fame. And so we've got a question related to that from Zach, who is a former Right On Sports student who is now an intern. One of the things that we do in the camp is for students who really, sort of take to the program. They come back when they're a little bit older and then can see the camp from the teaching side. So we're very glad that Zach is with us this summer. His first summer as an intern. And I think Zach has a question related to that Hall of Fame.
Yeah, I'm Zach from Right On Sports. My question is, why was it so important to see Sam Mills enshrined in the Hall of Fame?
Oh, that's a great question, Zach, and congratulations. You keep pounding, okay? You keep pounding toward your aspirations. The one when Sam was in New Orleans, Zach, he was one of 4 members of a linebacking corps that remains one of the best linebacking corps in the NFL to this day, called the Dome Patrol. It was Vaughn Johnson, Sam Mills, Ricky Jackson, who himself is in the Hall of Fame, and Pat Swilling, who many believe one day will get into the Hall of Fame. And not only did Sam distinguish himself in that group, but the way that he carried himself, the way that he overcame the odds of being a 5'9" guy and playing like he was 6'3", 6'4", showing up every day. And it was for that very reason. But in many ways, I kept pounding toward helping him and I wasn't the only one. There were many sports writers, much more famous than I, that carried the torch for. He was not one of those first ballot Hall of Fame. Took him a number of years to get in, but the thing is, I think when people think of Sam Mills, I think people think of Sam being more part of the Carolina Panthers organization than they do the New Orleans Saints organization, which is where he got his start. Zach, in Charlotte, outside the stadium there, they've got a pewter statue of Sam Mills in uniform that Scotty I know all the time. And just to show you what he meant to that organization. It took years for Sam to get in their Hall of Fame, their Ring of Honor, so to speak, in the Superdome. And I feel like all those years, and when he left under a little bit of a cloud. So I felt like people needed to, not his cloud, the organization's cloud, when he did, they offered him a less money than he thought he deserved, and perhaps the respect he thought he deserved. And that's why he ended up in Carolina. With the fledgling organization.
So Brian, and Scott as well, Kira has a question. Kira from Right On Sports has a question about the length of that process. Kira?
From Right On Sports, and my question is, why do you think it took so long for Sam to get inducted into the Hall of Fame?
Go ahead, Scotty.
Hi, Kara. That's a great question. I think it was a couple of things. A big one, and I'm not on the voting committee. There's and Brian, you may be. I can't remember. Or maybe
no, I'm not. I'm not.
Okay.
Yeah.
But there's a voting committee of about 50 people or so, and one thing they really want to see is a Super Bowl ring, that they won at least one Super Bowl, and Sam never did. In fact, he never played in a Super Bowl. That wasn't really his fault. I mean, you have to have a lot of pieces around you, and Sam's, the teams he played on in New Orleans weren't great. The teams he played on in Charlotte, with the exception of one, were not great at all. So I think that was a big part of it, that there was just not a Super Bowl championship that you could put beside his name. I think just one of those, and I think it wouldn't have taken to what was really the very last year of his eligibility as a modern era player. I mean, he skimmed in under the wire just in time this year, or he would have gone into another pool of candidates, and it might have taken many more years. So I was very thankful to see that he got in this last try, because I thought he was very deserving.
Brian, thoughts on that?
I think another thought, and Scotty's right on. Another possibility is that the market in which Sam played for, largely where he first established himself, was New Orleans. And New Orleans had never won a Super Bowl until his arrival, along with other people, Jim Moore, particularly, and Jim Finks, the general manager. They had never had a winning season. So Sam joined a lovable bunch of losers, essentially, when he came on board. And by the time he left, they'd established themselves as a winning organization, not an elite organization, but a winning organization. And then at Carolina, like Scotty alluded to, they weren't a winning organization. They did well, I believe, the first year, but it wasn't that they established themselves too in that vein. So those two things, I think, were paramount. And until, I think it was so important to have national writers and media take the torch on his behalf, and I think that helped push him over the across the line too. In, like Scotty said, his final year.
So one of our students for their magazine story are writing about the three most underrated NBA players of all time. And one of the things that he discusses in it is, part of the factor is what team you're on, right? So, like, are you getting the attention that other players are if you're in a bigger market, or in a team that's doing quite well, and that you individually might be quite successful, right? And a great player. But if you're not in the right place at the right time, you're not going to get the media attention at the moment. And then maybe down the road, you're not going to get as much consideration for that. So off the top of your head, can you think of a NFL player like Sam that maybe flew under the radar because of the teams that they were on or the locations, that if it was up to you, they would be in the Hall of Fame?
That's a great question. No one really comes to mind other than that Sam was one of those ones that definitely flew under the radar. I mean,
I'd say there's this guy. Well, sorry to interrupt you, Brian. But
no, that's okay.
Came to mind here. There's a guy named Torrey Holt who was a wide receiver. I know of him because he's NC State, and so that's not too far from Charlotte. I thought Torrey Holt was a fantastic player, a wide receiver for the Rams, the greatest show on turf. And I feel like he's past due to get into the Hall of Fame. He's been close several times, but people are like, well, he won a Super Bowl, but did he win enough, or was it really a product of the system or whatever? I think Torrey Holt was a great player. So I think he should.
Right.
He's a little underrated right now.
As a Patriots fan, I have to apologize, because if they had won that second Super Bowl, then maybe he'd be in the Hall of Fame.
Yeah, right. That might have done it.
You know, speaking of the Patriots, Eric, I mean, I think of Julian Edelman. I think of receivers like those guys that have they've put up good numbers. And there's a great debate, a big debate already launched about, whether some of those receivers should go in, whether they are truly Hall of Fame receivers, that kind of thing.
Right. So one of the things that we talk to students about is when you're going to, do an evaluation, you have to think about what your metrics are, right? And not just, I love this player. So, Patriots fan, I love Julian Edelman. His playoff performance is outstanding. If you look at his regular season statistics, it's actually no great shakes, right? Like sort of like his wins above replacement are not really anything to notice, right? So if you're thinking about the Hall of Fame, is the Hall of Fame based on career sort of, total stats, or like a number of key performances when you really stood out, right? Like, so then it becomes a philosophical debate of who you want the Hall of Fame to represent, right? So there's always something more to the story, I think.
Eric, one of those players that you think of immediately is Dan Marino. Never made it, hasn't made it. Does he deserve? Was he one of the better? Absolutely, he was a great quarterback. There's no denying that. But like Scotty said earlier, is that, and I'll use real quick, I'll just give you an example. Ricky Jackson never won a Super Bowl when he was in New Orleans. Like Sam, that same year or a year later, he joined the 49ers and they won a Super Bowl. And that helped Ricky Jackson finally get into the Super Bowl in 2009. Just that the ring, like Scott said, it's so important for people that do not really know the player, okay? And stats don't always tell the whole story about someone.
Right. So you both knew Sam. He's not here for this moment. So Joanna is going to ask our last student question. So Joanna has a question for both of you about that. Hi, Joanna.
Hello, I'm from Right on Sports, and my question is for the both of you. I was wondering, what would be Sam Mills' reaction to being in the Hall of Fame?
Wow.
Well,
Scotty,
he makes some funny jokes. Yeah, I'll tackle it first. He would say something funny about it first, that how did a guy who is short and balding and can't see very well ever make the Hall of Fame? This must be a mistake. But I think internally he would be very proud. Much like Brian mentioned, there is this statue outside the Bank of America Stadium, and that was put up well before Sam's cancer diagnosis. There it is right there. Beautiful. It's so lifelike. I mean, even down to there's a mouthpiece in his sock that he used to keep his mouthpiece in his sock on the sideline. Metallic mouthpiece, of course, in this case. But anyway, I think Sam would be extremely proud. His family will all be there. His wife, his widow, I should say, and his 4 children now grown will be there celebrating. They have wanted this for many years. And so it's just kind of a testament to a kind of, the underdog story, which we all love, dating back to Rocky movies and Rudy movies and everything else. Everyone loves an underdog, and Sam Mills really was an underdog who's made it all the way to the Hall of Fame. I think he'd be very proud of that.
Yeah, when I read this story in the last week, just to kind of bone up on this topic, that there's 5 things that kind of befit a entrance into the Hall of Fame, and it's commitment, integrity, courage, respect, and excellence. And Sam checks the box on all 5. And he would have been so humble and so thankful that, and it had nothing to do with him personally or a legacy or a brand or anything like that, that the big words in today's sports world, it's none of those things. It's that he played the game to the best of his ability and left and showed the way for so many people to tackle adversity and to make his family proud. I think those are the things that probably would have overtaken his emotions on the day that he found out, because the room would have been, that area is packed anyway with fans and family, friends, and what have you. And there would have been so many people. There are so many people in this football world, sports world, that were so relieved when Sam finally got the call.
So, I think one of the key lessons of Sam is, really walking the walk, right? When it comes to playing sports the right way, right? And being a human being the right way, right? Like, being open and honest and humble. So my last question for both of you then is, if Sam Mills sort of exemplifies playing football the right way, for both of you, what does it mean to do sports journalism the right way?
You can go, Brian.
Great question. Okay, yeah, great question, Eric, because I think I've got to compare apples and oranges. When I spent 33 years in the business and I got out roughly 2016, 17, where I stopped writing on a regular basis with some media entity. And I think it's so important, and what stayed true in all those years for me, before me, and will continue after me, is you've got to be fair. Okay, I think that is so important. You have to be fair to the people that you're writing about. You have to be knowledgeable, and you have to be damn correct. And I think that in today's social media, I think it's more important. And I'm not getting up on a soapbox here, but I think it's become more important to be first and not accurate. And I learned that it was more important to be accurate and / fair than to be first. I mean, we all wanted to break a story, okay? Everybody wants to break a story, but I think it's so important to be accurate and transparent as possible, and of course to be fair-minded. I think those are the most and the best attributes. And when you talk with people and the people that you cover, those will be the descriptions that they admire. And Scotty say, I hope they admired me, that you were fair and honest.
Last word, Scott?
Well, that's a good way to put it. I agree entirely with what Brian said. Think about when you're writing your own story, honesty, not glossing over something. If somebody lost a game, you have to write about why they lost the game. And, you don't cheer for your home team. We call that homerism in our business. You're fair, you play it down the middle, you're honest. And here's one little tip I always give any students that I talk to about writing. ask how people spell their names 2 different times, okay? Make sure you got it. Like Daryl can be spelled so many different ways, and I've learned that one the hard way several times, because it doesn't really matter what else you write about somebody. If you misspelled their name, they're going to be mad at you, and people won't believe your story. So just ask everybody about spelling their name twice. But yes, be honest, be kind, and spell the names right.
It's a question
Eric,
of
can I
basic
add one more
respect, right? Sure, Brian.
Yes. Can I add one more thing, Eric?
Sure.
And I think Scotty will definitely agree with this as well, is that I've found that we all make mistakes, okay? You try to limit your mistakes, but we all make mistakes. But to me, the big key is, one, to admit when you did, and not just in the paper, but to make yourself available to the person that you may have made a mistake about, okay? I can't tell you how often our people in the journalism business get criticized. Hey man, where was he? Okay, he hadn't been around since he just defamed me in the paper. Where's he been? Where's she been? And it's so true, is that, look, we all make mistakes. Give them a chance to get back at you, because you've taken, you've had all of the opportunity to say something against them. Give them an opportunity to tell you why you're wrong and you shouldn't do it again. And that really is a humbling experience. And the sooner that you acknowledge that we're all human, we all make mistakes, but let them tell you that, because it's important for that relationship.
Yeah, my students at Montclair State often ask me, what do I think the most important character is for a teacher? And I always say integrity, right? And I think, Brian, what you're saying there, that's about integrity. So I know that you're both busy and on a timeline, so I want to thank Brian and Scott both for joining us here today to share your experiences, both as journalists, but also to be sharing about Sam Mills. I think sad that he's not with us, but great that he's finally getting the honor of being in the Hall of Fame. I want to thank all the students for their questions today and for the questions throughout the summer. And I want to thank the viewers that have been watching the speaker series this summer. I'm sure we'll have it again next summer, and stay tuned to the Right on Sports website. We plan to have individual events in the fall, including the return of the roundtables, which are like the speaker series, except completely hosted by students. Students pick the topics, talk to the guests. So we'll make an announcement in the fall about the beginning of the fall's version of this roundtables. All right. So thanks everybody for watching. Stay safe, and then take care of each other.
Thanks, Eric. Scotty, good to see you.
Great to see you guys. Thanks for having us. We appreciate it.
Your eyes match the weather, raining under pressure. Oh, you say you wanna go, yeah. So let's get away from here. Let's get away from here. Takes us